Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, your go-to show for the greatest interviews from all around the world of rugby. My name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it. If you'd like to get in touch, I'm easy to find on all your socials, and you can always drop an email to the scrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, I am beyond thrilled to announce a brand new guest today. If you've been here for any of our chats with Harry Jones, you'll know this guest from the same amazing podcast, the 8-9 Combo, a pod that tops my list every single week. He's also a Rugby Pass columnist, an ABC Sport rugby commentator, and frankly, a generally brilliant individual. It's the one and only Brett McKay. Brett, I'm so pleased to meet you. How the heck are you?
I'm very good. And I fear that I'm not going to get any better after that intro, David. So I might just call it now and say thank you and good night. You've
That's a
been
career.
great.
So my favorite bit of your Twitter profile is quote unknown to baristas unquote,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's got inside joke written all over it. I'm desperate to know what
No,
that could possibly
it's
mean.
a very public joke. It's a very public Twitter joke, in fact. The baristas of Canberra, where I'm based, the national capital of Australia, the baristas of Canberra seem completely unable to hear the word Brett, to hear the name Brett. And so you give your name for your coffee and it's Brett, and it's come back Brad, it's Brent, it's Brian, it's Craig, it's Greg. One day I genuinely, David, got bread, Bread. So yes, if you see, if you're on my socials and there's suddenly a random picture of a coffee cup with a hashtag today's coffee name, that's that.
I've never understood the system anyway, though. You go, you order your thing, and they're like, "What's your name?" And I'm like, "David." And then they don't call out David; they call out the drink. And I'm like, "You
Yeah.
didn't leave. Are you just? Are you gathering
Yeah, I
my
know.
data?"
I know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's written on the side of a wall somewhere.
Brett, I am so excited to chat with you. Over the 4+ years I've been doing this, I have failed to get even a single Australian guest. If Nick White and Taniela Tupou would just kind of check their spam folders every now and then, maybe that would be different. But I've been dying to talk to somebody who knows Aussie rugby, and I'm ecstatic that I ended up with literally the perfect person. Thank you again for coming on.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. I'm looking forward to it. I'm quite shocked knowing how many Australians there are in the States playing Major League Rugby that you've not had an Australian in 4 years.
It does. It seems really weird to me too. Well, so as you well know, the only countries that have won a men's World Cup are South Africa, New Zealand, England, and Australia. I live in a country where growing up, rugby didn't exist. Like, I had never
Yeah.
seen a match. I had never met anyone who had seen a match. But somehow, even I knew that Australia were good at rugby. My world feels more correct when Australia are good at rugby. Right now, I'm liking what I'm seeing from this Wallabies team for the first time in quite a
Yeah.
while. If you believe in body language, these players look like they believe. Brett, am I right to be excited
Yeah.
about the state of rugby union in Australia right now?
Yeah, yeah. There's a really good feeling around it, David. It's Joe Schmidt, since he come in last year, has brought a real calmness to the Wallabies. They were sort of progressing nicely, but maybe not getting the results under Dave Rennie, and then his tenure was brought to a fairly abrupt end. Eddie Jones came in and basically blew up the place, and it feels like it took
As he does.
a good chunk of 2024 to sort of recover from that, and
Yeah.
now they're it really feels like they're pushing forward now as a team, and so now they are getting the results, and it probably even goes back to November last year. They beat England at Twickenham in that high scoring but fantastic game. Same sort of thing.
Amazing.
Got England get out to a lead. Australia launched the wet sail in the second half and come back with the late match winner. Pushed
That
Ireland
was
in
one of the most
Dublin.
exciting games of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Pushed Ireland in Dublin only a few weeks later. Only lost by 2 or 3 points, which seems to be even when Australia's been 8, 9, 10 in the world and Ireland's been number one. Ireland Australia matchup has always been pretty close for reasons that I still can't quite comprehend. And that was the case again in November. Come forward this year, another reasonable Super Rugby system a season. Everything's into the Lions. Expectations that you know there's all well, you know what the conversations were like. Should the Lions even be going to Australia? Maybe we should be going to France. Can we go to Argentina? All of that sort of thing. And certainly the first test was, good in parts, but not confidence inspiring. Melbourne was a completely different story a week later. And I don't know
Mm.
how you can turn a team around in a week, but Schmidt did that. And then another week in Sydney, and that was some of the best rugby I've seen from this playing group in a long time. Fast forward 3 weeks from that, they go to Ellis Park and score one of the most amazing wins I've ever been witness to see. And it was just
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. I still get chills thinking about the reactions to it at the time.
I almost skipped that game because I was like, I'm feeling good about Australia, and I don't want to see them get taken out behind the woodshed. I don't want to see Rassie do a number
Yeah.
on them. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch, and woo, what a test!
It had that feel about it, but again, like you get you get out to a whatever it was, 30, 33, 6 lead or something like that at Ellis Park. I was like,
And
oh
so
God,
fast.
I've seen this before. I know where this is going. And then they score one try and they score another try and score. And it's like, hang on, they're in front here. And yeah, just one of the great wins. And they've really kicked on, even with the losses, the loss in Cape Town, they're still kicking on. There's still elements of their game that's evolving and getting better each week. And they were really, really good to get that win in Townsville last week.
Yes, somehow the most recent or the second game in South Africa, I don't feel like that was a bad loss because of the first win,
No.
because of the momentum. It felt like, okay, well, we were not favorites anyway, and we're away, and we did a good job. It feels like they're still building.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair to say. And there's still a lot of things that they're not doing particularly well. I mean, Joe Schmidt said himself after the win in Townsville on the weekend that, yes, he's impressed with the way they have the belief and they can get back into contests and all that, but I'd really prefer they didn't get behind in games to start with.
That
So,
would be
you
nice.
know, it's a
Starting with the lead
it's
would be a good place to be.
yes, exactly right. Exactly right. So, how do you get better at coming back in games? Well, maybe don't let them get so far ahead. So there's still certainly plenty of elements there that there's still plenty of room for improvement in a few different areas. And that's maybe the exciting part, because when it does start coming together and they do start playing, at the moment they're playing, 50 or 60 minutes of good rugby in a game. But if they can start pushing that out to 70 and 80 minutes, then
Yeah.
then they are going to start getting some results.
Is all of this Joe Schmidt? And if it is, are you worried that he's about to disappear?
Yeah, that's a concern. It's a concern. Is it all him? I don't know. The easy answer would be to say yes, but I think the players are actually seeing what they can achieve themselves. They're everything that Schmidt's been telling them for the last 18 months has hit the right brain synapse or whatever it is. It's just tingled the inner buzz enough that they're finding what they need in those dark moments at the bottom of a ruck, or
Yeah.
when you're presented with four Springbok forwards in front of you and there's maybe a half chance of a gap out that way. They're making good decisions more often than not now, and that's yeah, there's coaching for awareness and things like that, but that decision in that moment, that's the player. That's the players themselves. So I think they're getting the reward for the work that they've been doing, I think. But yes, to
That
answer the second part of your question, yes, the concern is that what happens next year? Yeah, that's the
right.
concern.
Well, that confidence that he's built in the players, is that transferable? Does that stay with you as a player when
Mm.
you transition to a new system? Is the system going to be much different? It's going to be less kiss, is that right?
It is, yep, yep. Les Kiss has already been confirmed. He'll coach Queensland in Super Rugby next year, and then we'll transition into the national role after that. I think, from what I understand, he'll actually go with the squad to the UK in November. Now, I'm sort of hearing mixed reports as to how hands-on he'll be.
Mm,
My argument is that he should be hands-on now. He should be having a role in, thinking about how we want to play, having a role in selection, even, how you're building a squad
yeah.
and all that, because ultimately this is going to be the group that he wants to inherit next year. How different is the way Joe Schmidt has the Wallabies playing? How different is that to the Les Kiss philosophy? And the assumption there is that there's not going to be a lot of difference because they've worked together for years in the Irish system. So that's the assumption. That's probably the
Mm.
hope. I would say that it's going to be a reasonably smooth transition, and we certainly hope it is. But then there's also in the back of our mind, Queensland, as you well know, watching a fair bit of Super Rugby, Queensland have made the first week of finals for the last 4 years and not gone further. And so the thinking there is, what if you can't actually move Queensland on? Like, what if Queensland don't make the finals next year? What happens then? So
Mm.
yeah, there's still a little, slightly uncomfortable feel about the transition,
But
even though it should be smooth.
Super Rugby's slanted. Everyone knows by the time you get to the finals or maybe even the semifinals, it's going to be New Zealand teams. So
Yeah, yeah, but at some point, an Australian team has to beat a New Zealand team. That's just
yeah,
got to happen, and
and
it
it's
will
always
happen
been
at some point.
it's always been the Brumbies who were there at the end, not the Reds.
The
The Reds looked good
Brumbies have,
last year. The Reds were exciting
yeah,
last year.
they were right up until the point where they just suddenly couldn't. They might have hit their ceiling or whatever it was. The Brumbies ceiling
Yeah,
seems to be a semi-final. They've been beaten semi-finals in 4 consecutive years now, and that's. I know that I know the guys reasonably well here in Canberra, and that sort of that irks them every year because they go,
yeah.
right, this is the year we're going to go one better. Damn it! But here we are getting knocked out in the second last weekend again.
So you mentioned this most recent Lions tour. I don't know. It felt underwhelming to me. I don't know why. I can't even put my
Oh,
finger on it. But the win at the end, the win the Wallabies got to close it out.
mm,
I mean, it was kind of out of nowhere. It was gritty. It was nail biting. It was edge of your seat
yeah,
stuff. One of the Australian pods I listened to speculated that the big delay in that match was a huge benefit for
yeah,
the Wallabies, in
yeah.
particular because Will Skelton got a nice little extra rest and was able to go a little deeper.
Very
Um,
true.
this must have been a seminal moment for you and the Wallabies. Like that was an
Yeah,
incredible win.
it really was. It was a big 6 weeks. The Lions series was always going to be fairly consuming as a rugby writer, podcaster, commentator. I didn't do any commentary, but even just being in and around the games, it was fairly consuming. And so for 6 weeks, particularly the first 2 or 3 weeks of all the tour games, it was Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday into the first, like into the first test
It
basically, and
was a
so
whirlwind.
and even catching up. I saw obviously the Brumbies game in Canberra and then did the 3 tests. So I'd bump into journos that I knew and met from the UK and Ireland. I go, "How are you traveling there?" And when it got to test week, they all said the same thing. It's just nice to actually be able to unpack a bag because they weren't having to just go, all right, we're here for 1, 2, 2 nights, 2.5. I'm not going to, like it was just always on the go. So yeah, it was all encompassing. And the build up through the test series, the tests was just fantastic. And the match days were really well done. The match presentation was
Mm.
excellent. Um, the results I think went about the way most Australian fans were thinking. I think there was an expectation the Lions would win the series, but there was certainly a thought there's no reason why Australia couldn't win one. And if they could win one, well, maybe they could win two.
Mm.
That's what makes the Melbourne result so hard. It's like, oh, we were like literally half a ruck second off maybe winning that game. And, who knows what that would have been like. But, you know, sold out test in Brisbane, 90 plus thousand at the Melbourne Cricket Ground for the second test. Sold out test in Sydney as well, more than 80 odd thousand there. And so huge crowds, every game, obviously chocked with Lion supporters, but local supporters and Wallaby supporters who travelled around as well. Certainly did the 3 tests.
I
It was
love
an
watching
incredible
rugby.
series.
I love watching rugby on cricket grounds. Like
Do
obviously,
you?
cricket and another sport we don't have here.
You might be on your own here.
Many people have been like, David, you know what? You'd probably really like cricket. And I'm like, yeah, but I also like being married. So we're gonna.
It's a funny sort of a place. Like the Melbourne Cricket Ground. It's not quite like your big oval sort of stadia in the States there. It is literally round. It is
Yeah,
literally round. And so when we were the press boxes, uh, we weren't quite on halfway, but certainly looking down the middle of the ground, and it's funny where we were in the press box. We're probably maybe 150 meters from the middle of the ground. And so
Wow.
if you're sitting in the side on seats, even at the fence, the action is still 50 or 60 meters that way. And whereas
Wow.
the cheaper seats on the corners, the corner is just there because, try and picture a rectangular field inside a big circle. So the best seats in the house might actually have been the cheapest ones, which is
Ah,
which is a
I
which
love
is a
that.
fantastic, yeah, yeah. But certainly as you get a hot and the MCG is a 6 or 7 story building essentially.
Yeah.
Once you're up
And it
high
just it
and
just
you're looking
speaks
down on
of
that,
old world charm, the exposed wood and it's just
yeah,
an edifice.
it is a massive stadium. It seats 100,000 people, so it's a massive stadium. It's looks almost well, it looks completely nothing like what it did. It's more than 100 years old as a ground, but the Melbourne Cricket Ground of the late 1800s when it was first built is nothing like the giant concrete behemoth that it is now. So yeah, it's a remarkable place. But it is a funny place to watch rugby from because you can find yourself so far from the action.
By the way, this is way off script, but thinking of Super Rugby, the Ranfurly Shield is one of the things I love about Super Rugby,
Yeah,
having this extra little layer. I think all
in the
competitions should have
NPC in
something
New
like that.
Zealand. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, yeah, in the NPC, but the Ranfurly Shield, the actual shield itself was originally a cricket trophy. They added
Mm.
the rugby posts later to the actual trophy, which I think is really funny.
Yeah, and just refer to it as the log of wood,
Yeah, the logwood.
which looks nothing like a log of wood. But anyway,
It
I'm
looks
sure
like,
your New Zealand guest will tell you all about that.
yeah, talk to Hawke's Bay about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
um, the last few years, I'm not going to lie, the rugby championship has been a bit boring. I still
Yeah.
watch it fervently, but it's a drag when there aren't any surprise results. This year, Mr. McKay, is this the most
Yeah.
open-ended tournament we've seen in a decade?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question. We last year we were saying it was one of the best tournaments in a good while for all the reasons that you just outlined. This year is crazy. This year is crazy. We've just had we've had Marcelo Bosch on the 8-9 this week. Yeah, former Argentinian setter, and he saying exactly the same thing with all his networks and all that. He all four teams are capable of wins, annoyed at losses. There's going to be more upsets. You just know it. And so even now coming into round four this weekend, there's probably an expectation that Australia and New Zealand win at home again, but we can't rule out Argentina and South Africa winning, which
Yeah,
means at the end of round four, it is entirely likely, we've got to expect it even, that all four teams will still be all locked up on 2 wins. And so and that's how it's been. Round one, it was these two. Round two, it was the other two. Round three it's just been going win for win for win for win. And it's fantastic. There's two competition points separates the four teams going into round
it's
four.
amazing.
It might still be the case after this weekend coming, which would be quite remarkable.
This past weekend, it was an incredible test between Australia and Argentina. By the
Yeah.
way, the Pumas fans and the atmosphere they bring, how good.
Yeah, fantastic. I went up to Sydney 2 years ago. The game that Argentina won on the siren after the siren again in Parramatta and Western Sydney. That one was smaller stadium, seats about 28 or 30,000, and there
Ah,
was sort of four bays of Argentinian fans down in one corner, top deck and bottom deck, and they just sung their heads off for 80 minutes and change. And it just got louder and louder and louder. And by the time they scored the winning try, it was just absolute pandemonium down in that particular corner. But the atmosphere that it brings, the whole stadium, and the noise that it reverberates, and
yeah.
it's a reasonably new stadium, that one. So the noise that just reverberates around, just one of the best atmospheres I've been part of, and
So
certainly
good.
memorable. Yeah, yeah, and
I
you're
think
right. The swathes of Pumas and Argentinian soccer shirts. Obviously, everyone's got Lionel Messi's number on.
yeah.
Just I don't know what it is about Argentinians in Australia, but they seem to find each other when they need
They do.
to.
I think they just like being in a stadium where there's not concertina wire and like
Yeah,
armed
could well
guards.
be. Could well be. Could well be. I think I would too.
So I'm gonna do my American style, like ESPN content kind of thing. So, okay, I have to put on a different face. Did this win have a bigger positive impact for Australia or a bigger negative impact on Argentina? And by the way, you only have 45 seconds because this is ESPN.
It's a really good question. It had a huge impact for Australia, no doubt, because that just reinforces the belief. I've very deliberately asked Marcelo Bosch, how much would that have lost annoyed the Pumas, and he said, yeah, that one would have hurt because they would have felt like they'd done enough to lead well, and they did, but they just didn't have the ability to close it out, and that's maybe the difference between the sixth place, well, seventh place Argentina at the moment, and the top four teams. So, and it's look, Australia's finding that same sort of thing at the moment. How much time have we got left?
Brett, you are a scholar and a gentleman. I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Scrum of the Earth. Before I let you go, I'd love to get your insights on some Wallabies players. Do you have, a few more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
So, Nola Noah Lolesio,
Yeah.
I have on this very platform speculated that Eddie Jones like severely damaged his confidence to the point where I don't know if he can come back. Joe Schmidt has seemed back and forth. What's going on with Lolesio right now?
Yeah.
What's
Right
his future
now,
with the
as
Wallabies?
well, right now he's injured. He suffered a fairly nasty neck injury in the Fijian test before the Lion series,
Mm,
and that's it was he said himself that he was going to be out of action for a while, and that's been sort of reported now. It could be upwards of 6 months, which sort of puts him out to November,
oof.
December. Now he had actually signed a contract to go and play for a club in Japan. He's not actually said which club it is. I think I know, but I won't say it.
Hmm.
But he's heading to play in Japan this coming season. He's It's been speculated that he might leave Australian rugby for a few years, and part of that has been fueled by his sort of inability to nail down the Wallaby number 10 job. And part of that was because
Yeah.
he'd get 3 or 4 tests and then suddenly he'd get dropped, and then he'd come back and maybe play a test or two off the bench, and then he'd get dropped again. And he's sort of been in a real state of flux. There was periods where Dave Rennie backed him and then left him out.
Yeah.
No, Eddie Jones had a quick look at him and then swept him aside real quick. Missed the World Cup. Joe Schmidt has seemed to have backed him though. Bought him in last year. Played. I think he started most, if not all, tests last year, and he seemed to be the one that Schmidt was going to back through the Lions, and then he suffers this nasty neck injury, 2 weeks before the first Lions test, which injuries are rarely well timed, as you know, but that's about as poorly timed as it gets. So, but the length of the recovery of it actually has impacts for his is he going to be able to start the Japan season on time, for example? So there's further implications there. If he's up and running again and casting forward and sort of with a fairly big assumption that he's fit and firing again, if he's playing well in Japan, then the current Wallaby eligibility means that yes, Les Kiss next year potentially can bring him
Hmm.
back if he so desires. So I don't think he's out of the picture, but I don't think being in Japan will necessarily help his cause. I think there's still, even though there's no real restrictions on where the Wallaby coach can select from these days, I think there is still going to be a preference to pick local players, and
Mm.
local with an asterisk because obviously James O'Connor is playing has played for the Crusaders this year. But if the
And
caveat
been
seems to
killing
be
it.
that if you're playing, yeah, and playing very well, yeah, right. The caveat seems to be that if you're playing Super Rugby, then that's fine. We'll pick you from pretty well anywhere. There's precedent. There has been players come from Japan. Obviously, Will Skelton's come from Europe. There's been the odd player come back from the UK, but it's only ever been bits and parts. So I suspect, certainly whilst I think he's signed for 1 or 2 seasons in Japan, my suspicion is that it would probably take another injury crisis at fly half, like we have currently, funnily enough, for Loloseo to get a call back. Um, but yeah, it's still an interesting little juncture in his career because he's played 30 odd tests. There's still plenty of arguments for people from people who would say he's not done anything to deserve his spot. I
Mm.
think he was finding his feet as a Test number 10. I think he was primed for a big year. Had a strong Super Rugby season for the Brumbies again, and just poor timings just hit him.
From where I said it, it feels like it might have been too much pressure too fast, and I feel like
Potentially,
he
he
would
was
he
20
would
when he debuted. So yeah,
yeah, and he was yo-yoed seemingly based on, oh, you made your kicks today, you're in. You missed a kick today, you're out. It,
you're
it
out.
seemed
Yeah,
like it
yeah.
seemed like it was all centered on his kicking, and I wonder, 'cause you did, on the 8-9 combo, you did a great sort of deep dive on kicking and all the specifics and all the stuff that goes into it. Is that something that could be permanently in his head now? Did Eddie Jones do
Uh,
damage?
no, I don't. I don't know. I don't know. And I've I've got to know Noah a little bit over the years, and he doesn't seem to be the sort of guy that's rattled by that sort of thing,
Okay.
or he's got the ability, or he's gained the ability over the years to go. All right, it's happened again. All I can do is train hard, play well for the Brumbies, and if I'm playing well enough, I'll get called up. And because he has been through it a couple of times, he's been dropped. I don't know. I don't even know how many times he's been dropped over his career, over his 5 years. So he's sort of become used to it, and he basically now says, "Well, if I get picked, I get picked. I can't do anything about that. All I can do is play well for the Brumbies. That's the only thing I can control. So I'll just do that. I'll just concentrate on that." The interesting comparison for you is, and I've used this a little bit over
Mm,
the years. The interesting comparison is Marcus Smith in England. They're similar age, within about 6 months of each other in age. They
wow.
they debuted at a professional level around similar times. Go back a few years ago, the difference between the number of games that Marcus Smith had played was already about 50 or 60 or so. It's basically Marcus Smith has played twice as many games at a professional level to Noah Lolesio.
Wow.
And I use that example um, partly to illustrate how short the Super Rugby season is. The Brumbies played 15, 16 games this year, and that's getting to the semi-finals. So they're playing
That
everything but one weekend.
you
So
can
there's plenty of
you can
teams that
fit four Super Rugby seasons into a top 14 season.
absolutely, and maybe not even four, maybe more than four, I should say. I can't believe they've just started this weekend, just gone. Um, but that's the point. So Marcus Smith is playing 30, 35 games a year, and Noah Lolesio has to play every Wallabies test to maybe get 25. And
Yeah,
when he's being left out, then suddenly that's only 17 or 18 if he plays a few other games here and there. And so that's how the gap between two players of a very, very similar age
it's
has
fascinating.
has widened. And you look at Marcus Smith as a player now, and he's confident and he's brash and he's willing to try anything. And yeah, he's had to get used to the idea of playing fullback or coming off the bench and all that. Internationally, Noah Lolesio is still trying to work out how to be a game team driving number 10. Marcus Smith's been doing that, without on muscle memory for a good few seasons now.
That's such a great point. Do you think this stint in Japan will help him?
I hope so. I hope so. I hope he can get over there and just play because he loves it again.
Mm,
And I hope wherever he lands, is the environment that they're ambitious. They want to try things, so they're happy to. Well, obviously they're going to spend a lot of money on him, so they're going to back him. But you're right. You're our guy now. Take us to the finals. Take us to the Division One if they're a Division Two team. I hope he can just find a bit of freedom and can get
yeah,
over there and just play because loves playing it. And look, I hope he gets to see a bit of Japan and he will, I'm sure. And try a few things, different culture, different language, different playing group. He'll probably have different coaching ideas and philosophies and things like that. He might even have a few other international players in his team, and anyone who's spent a little bit of time. You listen to Michael Hooper talking about his time with Toyota for Blitz, and what he said from his two stints over a few years is that the time he got to spend with Kieran Reid, the time he gets to spend with Ian Foster, with uh, former All Black coach whose name just escapes me.
uh, Fozzie.
Yeah, no, he's Steve Hansen.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
you'll just cut my bumbling out, David, please.
yeah. Sorry, I don't do editing.
Steve Hansen, different coaching philosophies, different, different voices. They, he, Hooper still says, still to this day, so he got so much out of that because suddenly he was thinking about rugby in a different way. And so I hope Noah can go over there and find that same sort of freedom.
So rugby pundits always, you hear the phrase, "Oh, steel sharpens steel." In order to get better, you have to play the top competition. When you go over to League One in Japan, it's probably not the top level competition, but it doesn't seem to detract from these players. Malcolm Marks is right back into the Springboks. It doesn't seem to do him
Yeah.
and
Peter
James
Steph
O'Connor looks
hasn't missed a beat.
fantastic now. So,
Yeah.
what is it about that league that people go there and it doesn't take the shine off of their competitive edge, and somehow they kind of just get better?
It's quick. It's a really quick game. I'm not sure how much League One you've watched, but I'm guessing it's a little bit. When you do get to watch it, you realize, whoa, there's some speed on this game. Now it's probably also not. It's a quick game, but it's probably not the most physical game.
Right.
And that would be a byproduct of the fact that there are only three internationals for each side on the field. So you're not coming up against um, you know three South African back rowers. Now you might there's definitely a Polynesian influence is coming into
Mm,
Japan, and there's a lot of young guys from Australia and New Zealand with Pacific Island heritage finding their way to Japan. A lot of them are qualifying on residency grounds. So you look at the Brave Blossoms team now, and can go, which part of Japan are you from? Well, yep, he's from the Suntory Sun Goliath part. That's where.
yeah.
So
I don't mind that
they're
at all. I
no,
think
I don't want that
all
either.
international
But
teams look like that. That's fine.
but it is starting to change the way that the Brave Blossoms can play because they're bringing in different body types. That's not quite happening at League One level yet because they're still predominantly Japanese players. And so yes, the
Mm,
forwards are big guys and all that, but the backs I think typically are your smaller, wiry, quick, quick sort of guys. So the physicality isn't quite the same. The older players, the Will Genias, the Quade Coopers who've just finished up, Bernard Foley's still going. Will say that because it's not quite so physical, you can actually play a few more seasons than you're thinking. So they're not
interesting.
minding that. But it's definitely quick. So your fitness levels are going to need to be good.
Interesting.
Their S&C programs over there are quite good. All the teams now are spending a lot of money on their rugby programs, and because they're corporately owned teams, it's important for Panasonic that the Wild Knights do well. It's important
Right, right.
for Suntory that the Sun Goliath do well, and they didn't have a great season last year. So, suddenly they go, well, we've got to sweep it clean. We need to get this guy. We need to get this guy. We need to get this guy. And so that's why they're suddenly spending $1.5 million on Cheslin Colby or someone like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very much um, a uh, well, it's not an honor thing. It's a corporate greed, I suppose. That's what it's coming
Yeah,
down
yeah.
to. But it's a
Showing
it's
off
a
your
it's a real
company. And,
prestige
yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. Here we are in all our glory. Here's our
It's
very
also it's
successful rugby team.
it's funny too because people talk about, oh, in Japan they throw around all this money, but anywhere in rugby, the money compared to, the NFL, it's not money at all. It's
No,
it's
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 chump
change in your
change.
couch.
Absolutely, absolutely, it is. It probably costs you more to bend down and get the change. You're right. You're right. League One's in a really interesting place. I've sort of thought for a few years that they switched from the top league model, and that was sort of a real. It had a real air of um, this of a superannuation league. That's where you
Mm.
go when you've finished your time in Europe or you finish your time in Australia and New Zealand.
You're talking about
Go
the
and play in
MLR.
Japan for a couple of years. Yep, still sort of said a little bit about the MLR to a degree. But now that they've switched to League One, there's a different element and different air of professionalism about it. All of a
Hmm.
sudden, coaches know that they can go and spend a few seasons in Japan. It's not going to hurt their resume at all. In fact, it might even strengthen it. There's no there's no hesitation for players now to go over there because they know they're going to find a pretty decent level of playing. And you've only got to look at how many of the Springboks are over there at the moment
Yeah,
playing,
yeah.
and you know they're obviously finding the level that they need. So I think it's an interesting place though, because my expectation was that I can see them going to, well, you know, if we really want to get better, we probably should have maybe five international players on the pitch at any one point in time, and
Mm.
they'll just throw more money out. What they've actually done is probably the opposite thing. They've actually said, we're changing the way we classify overseas players and we classify Japan qualified players. And so they've maybe even tightened it up a little bit, which means that it's going to have to be more local players that come through, and it's going to force them to do more homegrown development, which means that ultimately they'll improve the depth for the Japanese national squads, which is ultimately what Eddie Jones as the Brave Blossom coach wants.
Mm. Uh, it's interesting too. Obviously there's a World Cup happening right now. Japan had some bright moments too. Every try they scored in this tournament was from a different player. There, I read that they have a total of 400 players to choose from. You're picking a traveling squad for a World Cup out of 400. That's uh, that's incredible. That means like if you're playing,
Yeah,
you have what, a 1 in 11 chance of making it.
yeah, but then I think about where the women's game is in Australia at the moment, and there's obviously only four professional teams. So you know the
Yeah.
Wallaroos squad's probably been picked from a lot less than 400. So you know if
Interesting.
you think about that, the Super W, yes, it has the Fiji and Drua women in it, so they're getting you know it could certainly be longer, but they're actually being able to string together. I think it's maybe an 8 or a 10 game season now. I might
I
have
thought it was
overblown
10
that.
last year. It
Yeah, I
was the
think it
first
might
time
be.
I'd have been able to see any
I
of it.
think they extended it. Yeah, yeah. But it still means that all right, I'm the fullback. She's the Australian fullback. She's sort of the understudy. I've only got to be better than that one over there, and I'm in the Australian squad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's competition for places. It's a pretty big carrot that's being dangled. But yeah, there's certainly a small playing pool. It's growing because the game is growing nationally. All the participation growth and all that is in the women's game, and that's the same for a lot of
Mm.
sports in Australia.
Yeah.
But it means that the club game is getting stronger in Sydney. It is getting stronger in Brisbane. It is getting stronger in Canberra and Perth and all around. So ultimately, more girls and more women will start finding their way through to the professional levels and to the semi-professional levels that Super W is, which can only make the Wallaroos stronger. But they're in a good spot at the moment. They've got through the quarterfinals. They
Yeah.
didn't get thumped by England, which was
No.
celebrated like a win, which is speaks to the haves and the have-nots about international women's rugby, doesn't it? That you're celebrating a 40-point loss to England. But
I,
they're in the knockout stage now, which is what they wanted to do. And as you well know, anything can happen in a knockout game. So they're in it up to their ears now.
well, before the Lions tour, I read a great article. It was basically an interview with Taniela Tupou, and he was basically saying, "I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get picked. I think
Yeah.
I'm not going to. I've been dropped from the Wallabies permanently." It was a really moving article, and it was really, honest and frank. But he's back in the squad. What's your opinion on Taniela? How's he been doing,
Yeah.
and what's his future with the
Since
squad?
since that article, he's had a really interesting year. Was with the Melbourne Rebels. They obviously were wound up, but he was contracted for another year, as a number of them were. It was about 16 or 17 of them were contracted for another year. So they had to be. I think the idea was that they'd be somewhat evenly dispersed across the other four teams. What ultimately ended up happening was that I reckon 6 or 8 of them went to Queensland, and another 6 or 8 of them went to went to New South Wales to the Waratahs, and like maybe two landed here in Canberra, and maybe a couple more went over to Perth for the Force. So Taniela Tupou went to New South Wales, to the Waratahs, and he really took a while to get going
Yeah,
this year. Really took a while to find his feet, and he couldn't quite put his thumb on it. Dan McKellar, the Waratahs coach, couldn't quite put his thumb on it, and they've worked a lot together in Australian teams. couldn't quite put together, and he was well down on form. His
Mm.
confidence was shot, and so when he gave that interview, and it was a great interview with Jonathan Drennan in the Sydney Morning Herald. You just sort of wanted to reach through the page and just give him a
Give him
hug
a
because
hug.
he was
Yeah.
like he even like one of his quotes was, do I even know how to play rugby anymore? I was like, mate, you've been a professional for 10 years. You've been wanting to
Yeah.
play this game since you were a kid. Just, snap out of it. And he's been backed by Joe Schmidt and the national team, and he's found some form. He came off the bench through the Lions series, and there'd be a snippet in this game, and then he'd do a few other things in this game, and suddenly, he's actually stringing a few things together, and then Alan Alato has a shoulder issue in South Africa, and that's his moment. That he gets his start, and he's been really good these
Yeah.
last few weeks. He's been really good, and the background to all of this year is that it was widely expected and anticipated that he'd head to France because he almost certainly wasn't going to be able to sign as big a contract as he had in Australia
Right.
again. He was almost certainly going to end up with a pay cut, but he knew that the big cashed up French clubs would come calling for an international quality tight head, and so he's going to land at Racing 92 in Paris before too long, and well, speaking of 35 game seasons, we'll see how he goes.
Just don't say pro de deux. Don't say pro de deux.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
So I'm the type of jaded fan where I'm extremely skeptical about overhyped players, but I am 100% in on Suaalii.
Yeah,
Brett, if this guy gets good on defense, he could be an all-timer for the Wallabies.
yeah, yeah. He really could. It's hard not to get sucked into the excitement and the hype. He's getting better each week.
Mm,
That's about the best thing you can say about, and the game in Townsville on the weekend, I think was, and I wrote for Rugby Pass that I think that was his best game since his debut at Twickenham, probably. And
yeah.
the Wallabies made a shift during the Lions series. The first test in Brisbane, they were really trying to use him just to bust through traffic, and he, I guess the best defense from Britain, they were not letting him through. They knew what he did to England, 6 months earlier, so they were double teaming. He was just not getting through. In Melbourne and Sydney, it was noticeable. They played to him a lot earlier, and that meant that he had a bit of time and space, and so he could actually start beating guys with a bit of athleticism. And they've kept that up in
Mm,
South Africa against Argentina now, and they're now playing for him well before the gain line, but it's bringing his offload game into calculations. He's linking up with his outside backs a lot better. So his attacking game is now starting to come to the fore, and I think defensively he's growing in confidence because of that. So in what people perhaps don't realise about rugby league is that it's very much a two-sided game now. He very much played as a left winger and a left centre, and that basically means, as a left centre, he was essentially defending and attacking on the 15-meter tram line basically, and he only ever went sort of left as far as the sideline and right as far as the goalpost basically, because middle forwards and all that. So he only really had to worry about his 7 or 8 meters of turf.
interesting.
Rugby is always a both sides game. So he's having to, there's adjustments there that he's got to make, but they've definitely simplified their defensive pattern so that he knows that he's pretty much just got to mark up on these couple of guys, and you can see him. He's drifting across the field really well. Lenny Kitau is one of the best defensive centers in the world. There's no question about that. And
Definitely.
so their combination is coming along nicely. That it's definitely getting better each game. But Lenny Kitau being such a good defender is making things easier for Joseph Suaalii as well. And even having really good communicating fullbacks at the back like Tom Wright and Andrew Kellaway, now that Wrighty's gone down, he's getting the information that he needs at the back that he can make really good defensive decisions. And he's putting a few hits on blokes. He's starting to whack
Yeah.
guys. He's getting caught out, and outside centre is probably the hardest position on the field to defend in rugby, particularly in the back line. So he's still getting caught out every now and again, but it's not as much as it was,
Mm,
this year. I think the exciting bit now, based on what we've seen this international season is if he can have a full season for the Waratahs next year, in 12 months' time, he's going to be something even better again. So he only got to play
Yeah.
half the Super Rugby season. He played 2 or 3 games, and he'd be out for a month. Then he'd play 2 or 3 more games, and he'd be out for a month. And so he came into the expectation was that he'd go to the Waratahs, he'd spend the whole season at outside centre, and by the time the Lions arrived, he was going to be firing. Well, the first issue with that plan was that Dan McKellar wanted to play him at fullback, and so he didn't actually spend any time at outside centre. He's back in the 13 jersey for the Wallabies. I think that's. I don't know that he could play fullback as well as maybe people think he can, but he's.
Mm.
I think he's got the game to make a fist of outside centre, and in time, I don't know. In time, maybe he actually ends up at inside. Perhaps we'll see. But he's going all right for a big
That was
athletic
my next
number
question. Where
13.
does he end up? Is he
Yeah.
is a 13 jersey? Is that where he's headed for?
That's certainly where he's start. I won't say he's looking comfortable, but he's looking more comfortable
Mm.
now in 13. He could. I potentially could see him heading inside to the number 12. There's a strong argument that he'd be a very good right winger, like a right wing sort of hybrid fullback. But Max Jorgensen's playing that game pretty well at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, fullback now is a lot different to even when Israel Folau was playing it when he first made that transition to fullback there a few years ago. All of a sudden your fullback has become a quasi second playmaker, and that's why the Brumbies game has become quite so dynamic because Tom Wright and Noah Lolesea work really well as a 10-15, and you're often seeing Tom Wright getting into first receiver when they need to, and they're setting
Mm.
each other up for first phase, second phase, third phase. Um, I don't think Joseph Suaalii has that in his natural footballing ability yet. He may in time, and I may have to rewind this podcast in a few years' time, David, and eat my words. At the moment, I'm not sure that he's quite equipped to do that, but I think he can make a good game of a good fist of the centres, certainly.
What's the history of players who switch codes like this? Like, I was really saddened to see Nwagana Tinawase switch back
Yeah,
over to the league because he was such a fun player. And I hear people on podcasts saying, "Oh well, Suoli, he's doing this for now, but he's going to go back. Then nobody ever stays." Like,
yeah.
are there players you can point to who came from league, went to Union, and then were nailed on Wallabies from then on?
Um, no, oh, that's a well. So Falau's the obvious one. So he played a good few years of league. Actually, made a very high profile, very high paying switch to Australian rules football for a season or for a couple of seasons, but that was
Really?
doomed for failure, and he really didn't do anything. Went to rugby after that, and has made a pretty strong career of rugby, despite what he ended up
Yep.
doing to himself in Australia. So he's probably been the most recent one, obviously apart from Suaalii. Mark Norganitawaze going the other way is interesting because there hasn't been too many full Wallabies going to league in the last probably the last 15 years. It's
Mm.
often been the sevens guys that have got picked
Yeah.
up by league clubs. But Nwangini Tawaze has had an absolute storming season for the Sydney Roosters in the NRL. He's going to he has finished the year as the top try scorer. Scored
Really?
23 tries in 21 games, something incredible like that.
Wow.
And he signed a 2-year deal deliberately to keep the door open to potentially be back in rugby in time for the 2027 World Cup. And he's already getting questions
Oh.
now. He's already getting questions about it now. And he's even saying that I know I've got a really big decision coming up because I'm loving what I'm doing in league with the Roosters, but playing a World Cup is a pretty big carrot, and playing in a World Cup at home is the biggest of them all. So
Yeah.
there's a really interesting little subplot perhaps boiling away there.
Here's a random story for you. A couple of weeks ago, I took a 3 hour nap, and when I woke up, I learned that Nick White had retired and then been named as a starter for the very next Wallabies test. I love Nick White
Yes.
to an unreasonable degree. I'm so glad I slept through his alleged retirement. Are you glad we've still got Nick White?
Yeah, he's playing. I think he's playing some of his best rugby in a long time. And I've written and I have said I'm quite sure it's because he's got now the freedom of an end date. And the same's true of James O'Connor. They
Mm,
know that the end of their Wallabies career is in the very near future. It might be next week. Like next week might be the point where they start referring to themselves as former Wallabies. But right now they can just go out and play, and Whitey is playing some really, really good rugby. I'm really,
yeah,
really pleased to see it.
and he's
He
winding up the opposition. He's classic.
he's yeah, he's doing everything that he's always done. But he's still what I'm really happy about is that even in saying nah, now's the time to go. It's I'm 35 or young kids, the body's starting to slow down a bit. He knows he's not as quick as he was, but his pass is still excellent. His box kick is still excellent. I for a long time have said he and Ryan Lonergan I think are the best passers in Australia. Um, so I wasn't surprised when he said after the line, ready ahead of the third Lions test, this was going to be it. And I had a bit of an inkling and a bit of understanding that that might have been the case. He was going to pull the pin after the Lions series, and so I sort of thought there'd be some sort of farewell. I didn't expect him to start a test, but he started and played very well. What's then co-conspired, of course, is that Jake Gordon's gone down and Whitey's retirement has been put on ice. Now, in his defence, and this has sort of been lost in translation a bit. In his defence, he did say, "I'm going to pull the pin at the end of the year." He did say that. He basically said, "I'm not going to play in 2026," but he said, "I'll play the year out." And his intention was to actually to play thinking that he wouldn't be needed in a Wallaby squad, he'd go back to the force and play the domestic Super Rugby Australian competition, which is starting this weekend. So the four states are coming together for about a month. They'll play
Hmm,
another bunch of games. Just a little chance to get a bit more game time in young
interesting.
players and the best club players around the country as well coming into the state squads. So his expectation was that he'd go back to the force and play these Super Rugby Oz games. He's now started four straight tests,
Yeah.
five. Yeah. So yeah, there's Joe Schmidt. Actually, I had a laugh. I think it was after the Cape Town test. Joe Schmidt said something about Whitey and I are having a bet to see who actually retires first.
when,
So
when I picture Nick White, I always picture almost like a cartoon. Like I just picture a heap of bodies with a single head underneath, and it's Nick White's head going, bah, 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 just jawing
he's
away at every
just
single
got
person who's crushing him.
it's just the perfect Dick Dastardly Mo as well. It's
I
just
know.
he just
I'm
looks
like, are you the
like
guy in my pizza box?
yes, exactly. But he's playing great. He's playing really, really good rugby. To the point where I think they've potentially missed an opportunity in not giving Ryan Lonergan a debut in these Argentina tests because
Mm,
Whitey's not going to play forever.
right.
Ryan Lonergan needs to get his flying miles up. I think it would be a huge ask to ask him to debut in a Bledisloe test or, against England at Twickenham or something like that later in the year. I think there was an opportunity to get him a couple of games now, and that's been lost now. So
It, it's
he will play
interesting.
for Australia this year. I'm quite sure, Ryan Lonergan, but it's not going to be this week.
We started by talking about how the Wallabies are looking really strong right now, but they're kind of looking strong with Nick White and with James O'Connor and Will
Yeah,
Skelton. Is that concerning that, like, we're on the edge of the
yeah.
retirement village?
It's it's interesting, isn't it? And again, the playing depth. You'd love an active squad of 60 or 70 players like Rassi Erasmus seems to have at his hands, or Fabien Galtier in France seems to have
Mm.
a working squad rotation of about 75 at any given point in time.
Yeah.
And the so-called C team that he took to New Zealand was pretty bloody good in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Um, So we haven't quite got that luxury in Australia. But I think there is a gradual recycling of players. So, Nick White won't see the year out. James O'Connor won't see the year out. So, there'll be Ben Donaldson's back with the squad now. So there's a younger fly half already. Tane Edmed gets his first start this weekend. So there's another young guy coming through. Tom Liner's only, 21 or whatever he is. So there's a bit of a refresh going on here. Will Skelton's 34, I think. He's
I
been
think
around
that's
for
right.
about 15 years, but I think he debuted as an 18-year-old, something like that. So, he can probably get to 27. And I think that's the question now. You look at the older players in the team, and it's, James Slipper. How many of them can get to 2027? And that's
Mm,
where you see the retirement's probably going to happen this year a bit. And James Slipper's another one. I think I don't think Slips gets to 27. I think he's the first to admit that
unlikely.
he doesn't have two more preseasons in him. He wasn't enjoying preseason. He wasn't enjoying preseasons 5 years ago, so he doesn't have two more in him. I know that.
There was at least one season where James O'Connor was playing on the same team as Jock Campbell, and they call James O'Connor Jock because of the initials, but
Yes,
then they also have a guy
JOC.
named so I was always I had to refer to them as Jock and non-Jock Jock.
Yeah.
It was a strange year.
I like that. I like that. As someone who refers to himself as the non-Harry part of the 8-9 combo. Yeah, I like that.
Final question for you.
Yeah.
Sorry to spring this on you. In the World
No.
Cup, Australia, they have a very tall order in front of them this weekend. I know lots of rugby nerds are tipping Canada to win the whole thing. What can your Wallaroos do to stand a chance versus the world's most lovable juggernaut?
Yeah. It's a good question, isn't it? They've always been so strong in the women's game,
Yeah.
Canada, and it's um and like to the point where you think, how have they managed to get their women's program so right and to be a genuine top four team for a good few years now? It's not by accident. It's not recent.
No.
How have they managed to do so well in the women's game, but the men's game has sort of had its flash moments, and I couldn't even tell you where Canada is ranked at the moment. Um, but they are a very good outfit, aren't they? So,
Yeah.
can the
And so fun
Wallaroos
to
cause?
watch, and they have so many
Yeah,
weapons.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They've got so much strike power out wide. They've got a strong pack. Their set piece is good. The Wallaroos will give themselves a fighting chance. I said before that once you reach a knockout stage where you just never know what happens on the day, and they'll take a lot of confidence out of the way they led England for as long as they did in the last
Yep.
pool game. Um, you know, in a knockout game, the scoreboard can be your friend. So if they can get out to a lead and just keep them at bay, keep them at arm's reach, take your threes, for goodness sake, take your threes in a
Yeah.
in a knockout game, then maybe you can. What they won't want to be doing, and where they've got themselves caught up against New Zealand, particularly in the past, and even England, is that if they find themselves behind early, it's really hard to get back into the contest. So they've
Yeah.
just got to try and elongate that contest for as long as they can. But they can play with freedom too. The expectation is that they will not beat Canada this weekend. So why couldn't they? Why, if no one thinks if no one thinks we could beat them, why can't we?
There's
That's what
got
they've
to
got
be an
to do.
upset. Like history tells
Yeah,
us,
there
there's
has.
going to be an upset, right?
It feels like there's got to be one somewhere. There hasn't really been one yet. There's been um, who had the oh well, Australia and the US played the draw, of course.
Yeah.
So maybe that was as close as we've had so far. But you're right. It feels like there's got to be an upset, and first week of the knockout stage feels like as good a chance as any.
Brett McKay, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I'm a huge fan. I feel honored to have you on the show. Please give us a plug for what's coming up. The 8-9 Combo Pod is very active. I can't recommend it enough. Can you tease any guests you've got coming up?
I can't, I can't because I think we're actually out of action a little bit next week. So Marcelo Bosch has just landed, just gone live in the last 12 hours or so. So that's still nice and fresh. We Harry and I are trying to actually organise ourselves to see whether we can maybe have a short little tap and go chat in the next 24 hours to sort of cover off on the team news that we didn't get to do because we had to
Oh.
record with Cello before all the teams come out. But we will definitely be back Saturday night with our TRC post mortem after both games on Saturday, and they've been going gangbusters for us. The post mortem after the Ellis Park test. We just sat there and watched the YouTube numbers spinning like poker machines. They end up doing well over 30,000 views. It was became our most listened to pod audio episode as well. Last weekend has gone great guns as well. All of our TRC postmortems have done really, really well. I think people love listening to reaction podcasts and things like that, because I think they want to confirm that, did I see that right? Is that how that played out? They want to see whether anyone else heard that. And so, and particularly when there's a surprise result, it's like, all right, what just happened? I need someone to explain that to me. And so, we've sort of found a nice little spot for ourselves, and we love doing it. It's logistically challenging sometimes, particularly
Yeah.
when Harry's in a stadium somewhere with not great Wi-Fi, as was the case at Ellis Park, funnily enough. But we love doing them. They are a little bit cathartic, even when the Wallabies happen to go down. It can actually be cathartic to talk it through. So
Mm.
we really enjoy doing them. We're really glad that people love doing them. So certainly keep an eye out for that on Saturday night post match.
Harry, sorry, I just called you Harry. I'll be editing that later.
I'll
Uh,
absolutely let him know that's happened.
uh, by the way, the win at Ellis Park, was that the best game of 2025? I kind of think
Yeah,
so.
I can't think of what tops it.
I can't think
I'm
of
not
one.
gonna I'm not gonna try very hard either, for what it's worth.
Nice. Brett McKay, thank you so much to everyone who listened. Thank you for your support to all of you across the globe. Cheers. Talk to you soon and be well.